And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today on our show on Deborah Kobylt Live. And joining me is somebody that so many of us in Los Angeles have watched for decades on Channel 4 as
Easy.
the weather person. We have Fritz Coleman. Such an honor to welcome you here. Fritz is a five-time Emmy-winning comedian. And at the moment, he's done a lot in his life. At the moment, he's doing a residency for his one-person show called Unassisted Living over at the El Portal Theater in North Hollywood. We've seen it. We loved it. We sent a lot of our friends over there. Gosh, Fritz, thanks for joining us.
Bless your heart. I'm happy to be here. I'm honored to have been invited. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have great taste in sculptures.
Oh, yeah?
And I can only see a part of your room there, but you've done a great job decorating.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll invite you over. You can see the rest.
Okay.
You and I have many friends in common, right?
I know.
Mark, we talked about that. Mark Thompson, another fellow weather person, Tim Conway Jr. So maybe one night I'll have a whole collection of you over and you can go through the house. How's that?
That would be awesome.
Wouldn't that be great?
I've been friends with Mark for 45 years. I have a picture of him holding my baby, my first son, when he was born, and now he's 37 years old.
Oh, I love that.
Mark is the best, one of the smartest people I know, and Conway's one of the most entertaining people I know, so you have good friends.
Yeah, as do you, right? So I really am honored, and I mean that, to have you join us. And your show was hysterical, but there's a lot to talk about here. We'll get to the show in just a minute, because I always like to know the backstory, right? Were you always a funny guy? Because even I did not know. I figured you just jumped over from being a weather person to doing comedy, because it's like, hey, why not? But that's not the case at all, right? In fact, you were doing comedy first, and then you got sort of discovered, as they say. Can we go back to that moment?
Absolutely. Do you want me to go into this story?
Yep, that's why I asked you. Please.
So I came out to LA in 1980. Where I met Mark Thompson is we were both DJs at WKBW Radio in Buffalo, New York, which was a big 50,000 watt clear channel rock and roll station. And I came out here in 1980 to do comedy because I was trying it around Western New York State, became smitten by it, and thought I wanted to try it. And in those days, you had to come to the Comedy Store to be discovered. All the comedians that did Johnny Carson, like Jay Leno and David Letterman, all talked about the Comedy Store. So the Comedy Store is where you had to come. So I said, well, I'm going to LA. I'm going to go to the Comedy Store. I was woefully underprepared. I had like 5 minutes of material. It was the hugest mistake I ever made.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was really, I was underprepared, underskilled to come out. The first night I went to the Comedy Store, I'd never been to LA before, but I did commercials with this lady who allowed me to sleep on the floor in her apartment until I found my own apartment. The first night I got to town, I threw down my backpack, threw down my sleeping bag, and went to the Comedy Store. And I just was a paying customer because I just wanted to feel what it was like to be in there. And on stage that night was Gary Shandling preparing for his first Tonight Show appearance, Jimmy J.J. Walker from Good Times, Billy Crystal doing his unbelievable Muhammad Ali impersonation, and the closer was a guy by the name of Charles Fleischer, who was honestly Robin Williams brilliant. He just never crossed over to the general public, but he was the voice of Roger Rabbit in the movie. A brilliant guy. Anyway, here I was with four of the funniest people working. I was so devastated with how ill prepared I was to be in Los Angeles. I left the room with my tail between my legs, and I said, well, I'll stay here till my money runs out, and then I'll go home. I'll apologize to my parents for the false alarm and having moved to LA, and we'll do this. So
I love this.
I did all the open mics. I did the open mic at the Comedy Store and the Improv for a couple of years and honed my acting, got a little more material. And then I became what they call a paid regular at the Comedy Store, where I was doing several spots a week and being paid for it. And then in 1982, a friend of Mark's and mine, John Beard, who was an anchor at Channel 4 in Los Angeles.
Oh, I know John. I actually work with John over at Fox 11.
At Fox, yes. He's one of my best, and Mark, one of our best friends.
Oh, a good guy. Yeah.
And just the best ever. He's one of the few people in this business who is exactly the same off the air as he is on the air. this huge North Carolina Southern personality. Anyway, he brought his boss, being the news director at Channel 4, and his boss's wife to see me one Friday night at the Comedy Store. So I talked on stage about having done the weather in the Navy. I did Armed Forces Television in the Navy. And I was forced to do the weather, not knowing anything about it. And I had a couple of anecdotes about that. I just faked my way through this weather. After my show at the Comedy Store was over, I went backstage to meet John and his friends. And this news director, Steve Antonetti, God rest his soul, said to me, "This is an odd question, but do you have any desire to come to Channel 4 and do some vacation relief work for me? I need a weatherman on the weekends. I need a utility guy who can fill in for my main weatherman who hasn't had a vacation in a year. I really need help. Would you be interested?" And I was making $25 a night at the Comedy Store. I
Big
said,
time.
"Oh my God.
Yeah.
When do you want me to start? And may I carry your wife to the car?" I was so I said, you did hear me say that I don't know anything about weather. He said, "Perfect. There's no weather in California. This will work out great." So I had to audition. The next week I auditioned. I got the weekend and fill-in job. I did that for 2 years. Then my predecessor, as the main weather guy, went to CBS, and I was bumped up to the main weekday position. And I retired 2 weeks shy of my 40th anniversary at Channel 4. I always say it's the greatest stroke of show business luck since that woman was discovered at Schwab's Pharmacy in the 40s.
Isn't that the truth? Wow.
Unbelievable. And the older I get, the more grateful I am at the good luck I was shoveled out in my life.
Did they send you to weather school, or did you just sort of learn on the job? No.
In those days,
Okay.
It wasn't about meteorology. It was a personality job.
Yeah.
I always said that my job as the weatherman was to be the palate cleanser between the tragedy and the sports. Just have a light moment, take a deep breath. People have been assaulted with freeway chases and drive-by shootings and war in the Middle East. Let's just have a little moment of personality. The weather was the least threatening part of the newscast, and then bring on Fred Rogan.
Yeah. I remember when we first moved here, we watched you, and there you were delivering 7 sunballs. And we, here we're coming from New Jersey, right? And we were in a little bit of shock. I think the station, because my husband working at a radio station, same place, they put us up somewhere in Burbank. I don't remember the place at the time. And we would hear coyotes in the distance. There's no coyotes where we were in New Jersey and New York City. No, and there you were delivering the 7
What
sunballs.
City in New Jersey?
He's from Saddlebrook, not Saddle River, Saddlebrook, big difference. And I'm from Union Springfield. So look, working class kids.
I grew up in Philadelphia. I have many friends from New Jersey. I went to Ocean City every summer. Jersey people have soul.
We're tough people. I mean, my husband and I met at the Jersey Shore in Atlantic City. It was his first radio station, my first really TV gig, big time. And it was great. That's where we, learned what we do, right? But so and then we eventually moved on. But when we first came here to see you doing the weather, we were like, because my husband always wanted to do weather. And he goes, "Wow, what a cool job." He just stands there and shows us the sunballs.
So broadly, right.
But you were great.
You can be wrong 95% of the time and not get fired.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. We're going to bounce around a little bit. You were in the same building as The Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm.
I also learned that you had been on The Tonight Show 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
Please tell us what that was about. And was it planned? Did they call you at the last minute? Tell me about it.
Well, the first one was planned. The first one took me 2 years to work my way in. The talent coordinator that was in charge of the comedians, a guy by the name of Jim McCauley, sort of nurtured me along. He thought the hook of being a weatherman comedian was funny. I talk about it in my act. So he said, "This will be a good hook to get you on the show." So he worked with me for a couple of years. He'd come to the Improv and see, he said, "Let's try this joke." He had a great sense. And he would always say, "I'm not trying to manipulate your act. I just know what my boss, Johnny Carson, appreciates. So let me tell you what to do." And it is painful as I can be. And he was right about everything. Yeah. So the first time I got on, it's, as you might have heard from other comics, it's like your comedy bar mitzvah. Once you do it, and I'm not even Jewish, but I felt like I was at a bar mitzvah.
Right.
Once you do it, it sort of gives you this cachet in show business. You can bump up your fees at clubs. You can get work in Vegas opening for people, all those things. The thing about it was I was already on TV in LA, so it's not this big groundbreaking thing. Ooh, look who we discovered. I'd been on TV doing the news for a few years. So the first time I went on, it was a gift because I got bounced. I got bumped, as they say. If you remember the old Johnny Carson show, the comic would come on at like 10 after 12 to 16 or 17 after 12, after the headliner went on. Well, if the headliner went long, you got bounced and they would bring you back. Well, I got bounced twice. The first time was Charles Grodin, who was a very funny man, but he couldn't shut up. He never knew how to draw a story to a conclusion. So he went very late and I got bumped for him. The second time was Heather Locklear, and Johnny was enamored with Heather Locklear. So I got bumped twice before I finally made it on, which turned out to be a gift because by that time you just want to get on and get it over with, and your nerves have settled down significantly, and it's not as intimidating as it was. So it was like 2 fire drills before you actually left the building.
So what did you do? Did you do your stand-up act sort of combined with weather? Like,
oh no, I just did a stand-up act, and I did a couple of jokes about being the weatherman in California. All you have to do is memorize morning clouds and fog, hazy afternoon sun, and every day figure a new way to say those words like you've never said them before, and you've got the job pretty well locked up. And I do that. You do, as they used to say in vaudeville, you do 2 on you. So I'd start the set with 2 jokes about myself to let people know who I am, and then I would go on to other stuff, talk about Kmart and being a young parent and all those things that made me a normal person. And then at the end, I said, well, I'd love to talk, but I have to go do the 6 o'clock news upstairs. And everybody laughed at that. They thought it was hysterical. I get off. So it was fun.
well, because it's a slice of life. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? People are in the audience going, wow, this is a real guy. Because you know how it is when you're in the audience, you're sort of surrounded by Hollywood people. And it's almost like Hollywood people don't seem like real people. But here
Yeah.
you are, then you have to go to your real job at 6
That's a
o'clock and
really
deliver.
good point. That's a really
Yeah,
good point. And not just the Tonight Show,
yeah,
but when you work clubs like Flappers or the Improv or the Comedy Store, it's a lot of industry people who know
yeah.
people who are comedians, they know people who are actors, and they're very hard to impress. So you really find out how funny you are if your act translates out of town. And by out of town, I can mean as close as Ventura or
Yeah.
San Diego, just not LA, not Hollywood. And you only really have a sense of how good you are when you can make just the general population laugh. So you're right about that. It's always a lot of show business people who are hard to impress.
Yeah, well, that's why unassisted living is really so delightful and so funny because, when I was in the audience, I was looking around. I wanted to know who was there. And it was regular folks from all over the place
That's
and
all it
different
is.
parts of, yeah, and different
My,
parts of
my demographic,
California.
my demographic is old people and their parents.
I don't think I'm an old person and I was
Not
there.
you. No, you probably were the youngest person in the audience that night.
Yeah, but I wouldn't sell it so short because let me tell you, I told my kid about it. He's 22. And he's like, oh, that sounds funny. I'll go. I mean, I honestly think that a lot of people, because then they'll see their parents and grandparents in the
Yeah.
show. You know what I mean?
And for
I thought
younger
it was,
people, the show is like a cautionary tale. You're not
yeah.
old yet, but if you're fortunate enough to hang around long enough, this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah. You talk about a lot. You talk about your dad in the show. I mean, you really build it up. We get to know who Fritz Coleman really is during this time on stage. You talk about dad. You talk about being single now. You've been married. You have children and grandchildren, and you talk about sex life of older people, which I thought was actually kind of fun to hear about. You want to talk about that a little bit? A little
Sure,
part of me.
I won't do the bit, but I will talk about anything that is part of the common experience of getting old. And when
Yeah.
you get old, having sex is different, but a part of getting old. And you don't stop having sex; it just takes on a different flavor. Excuse the expression. It's different, and people relate to that. I find that men find it hysterical. Women are slightly put off by it, but I like that because it's real. As long as it's real, it's not dirty. as you will remember. It's not, there's nothing salacious about it. It's real. And as long as it's real, I'll talk about
Yeah, it was very real. And it also, I
it.
mean, people were laughing hysterical. And you're right about that. The women were kind of like cautionary,
Yikes. Oh
and the
my
guys were like, yeah, come on, keep going. We could do this.
God.
So I enjoyed hearing about that. And you were just, you held nothing back. But to your point, you really weren't dirty about it. You were just, it was a slice of life and a slice of
There's
your
not
life.
profanity in it or anything. And it's just the common experience of being of a certain age. Somebody reviewed my show as the perfect baby boomer support group.
Yeah. It's actually very true. But do you change the material? Because I know that you perform there once a month, um, as you know, people do when it's a residency, right? It's ongoing.
Mhm.
But do you change it? Do you test it out? Tell me your
Yes,
process.
I add something new to every show. It can be a shorter piece or several shorter pieces or one long piece, but every show I try to add new material because the ability, I have an opening act and she does 15, 20 minutes, and then I do about an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's a gift to be able to do, as you know, having done comedy, it's a gift to be able to do that amount of time. When you do a club, all these clubs in LA, like Flappers and the Improv and the Comedy Store, what they call showcase clubs. So there are 4 or 5 performers on stage in one night. And so you get to do 15 or 20 minutes, which is great. But to really stretch out
Oh,
and to
yeah.
really allow people, as you mentioned, to get to know you, where you can drill down on your own life and sort of expose who you really are, takes a little bit longer. So I do an hour and 15 minutes, and then I can go in and out of all the family stuff and the real stuff. And so I add to it all the time. Every time I go in there, I come in with new material. Not all new material. It takes too long to hone material, but I add things to it and then work it afterwards.
Yeah. How do you work it? I mean, you just work it in front of a live audience. You go to
You work in
places
front
like
of a live
Flapper.
audience because you
Yeah.
just never know. You can sit in your
Mm.
living room and crack yourself up. This is the most brilliant piece of material I've ever written. I can't wait to get this in front of an audience. Then you get
Right.
in
Right.
front of an audience, crickets, or they laugh at a place you didn't expect them to. So it's just that's the miracle and the mystery of stand-up comedy is finding out where the laughs are, and then if you're successful and your instinct was right, it's the greatest victory.
Yeah, I mentioned to you off air that I've done a little comedy, and I
Hmm.
was, I guess, pretty good at it because they called me back and said, "Would you like to come Saturday night?" And I was turning them down because I have a terrible, I've got stage fright. You know,
Hmm.
this is easy for me. I can control the question and answers and keep them as short or as
It's
long as
more
I want
intimate.
to.
Yeah, no, this is a skill different than being on stage and building up false intimacy with drunk strangers. You don't require that to feed your neurosis, like I
No,
do.
no.
I love to be in front, and people ask me, well, where do you think it comes from? So I don't know. It's a father pleasing thing. It's all kinds of psychology. But my daughter has exactly what you have. My daughter has a spectacular voice. I mean, Adele caliber voice.
Oh,
Sings beautifully. We've recorded her in a recording studio. She has no desire to do it professionally because she doesn't like to be in front of people.
isn't that interesting?
It's so
Wow.
fascinating.
Wow.
Mhm.
Well, you mentioned your dad, so let's dial it back to you as a kid. What was it like growing up? Where'd you grow up? And talk to me about the very first time that you went to a comedy show.
I grew up in suburban Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a
Where?
town in the town called Wayne, which is west of Philadelphia by about 30 miles.
By the way, I know it. I was just in Downingtown this weekend at a wedding.
Downingtown
So,
is where my father worked for 40 years in Downingtown. He worked for Brown Brothers Contracting.
yeah,
And it's just a beautiful part of the United States. The
yeah.
schools were fantastic. The neighborhoods were fantastic. And I, I loved the ability to grow up there. Anyway, so I grew up in suburban Philadelphia. I went to Valley Forge Military Academy for a couple of years. I went to Temple University for a couple of years. I graduated from Great Valley High School. The thing that lit my pilot light about comedy, I think, is what you're driving at. Is when I was in 11th grade, my uncle bought me tickets to see George Carlin at a place called the Valley Forge Music Fair. You know, from the East Coast, they have these things called music fairs.
Oh yeah.
In the summer, they were like tent shows. It was like this huge, beautiful, elegant tent like you'd see at Cirque du Soleil that seated like 3,000 people. And they
It really
put
was
it up in
fabulous.
Valley Forge Park just for the summer. And then they would put on these shows. And George Carlin was there. And I had seen comedy on television, you know, snippets on the Ed Sullivan Show and a 5-minute set on the Carson Show, and, you know, little, but that was an appetizer. I'd never seen a full-on comedy presentation by a solo act commanding the presence of 3,000 people on stage. So I went to see George Carlin.
Mm.
And I'm not exaggerating to say that it was almost like a religious experience for me. I didn't know how comedy worked. I didn't know that, you know, you work to build an hour set, you work on it for a couple of years and you hone it and edit it and you plug in pieces and you unplug pieces and you sort of build it from the inside out. I didn't know that was the science. George Carlin, one of George Carlin's great gifts was to be on stage and say these words like he's never said them before. And here's this guy, all he had was a microphone and a bottle of water, and he talked for an hour and a half and convulsed this audience. And I thought, oh my God, first of all, that's the greatest. It's like you having power over your environment here as a host. But I thought that's the greatest amount of power a human being can have over an audience, is to, with their words and thoughts, get this response called laughter and convulse this audience. It was like a TV evangelist, but there were punchlines involved. And it changed my life. Now, I never thought I could do it professionally, but I became a huge fan. And George Carlin was a special draw for me because he was a great wordsmith. He was a wonderful user of language. And that was always the part that really made it good for me. And then I became a student of other guys like Robert Klein, who was one of the great live performers of all time. I saw him several times. And then Mark and I were working at this radio station in Buffalo, New York. And back in those days in radio, you would often get jobs hosting various events at various nightclubs around town. I had an ongoing job being the MC at a jazz room in Buffalo, New York. It was a very famous place called the Tralfamadore Cafe. Very famous people worked in there. Spyro Gyra and Sarah Vaughan and all these great people. So I got a job hosting in there. And I don't know if you're familiar with any jazz musicians, but they're on their own time schedule. You know, meaning we'll start the show when we feel like the vibe is right.
I get it.
However, the club owner advertises the show to start at 8 o'clock. So whether or not the musicians were ready to play, I would go up and start the show at 8 o'clock, and I better have something to say. So I announced the upcoming acts. Please tip your waitresses. I would go through all that, but then I would often have 10 or 15 minutes before these players would decide they were ready to play. And so I began to write material for myself purely for having something to talk about until the acts were ready to play. So I built a body of work, as a defense mechanism to get ready to introduce these jazz acts. And then I started to get pretty good at it. And then the owner of this club thought, you're not bad. Why don't I give you a comedy night here?
Oh, wow.
And so Monday nights were always dark in the nightclub business. So he said, I'm going to give you a Monday night, see if you can build a comedy audience. So I would bring comedians in from Toronto and Canada and other parts of the United States, and we got a great following. And then I became smitten by comedy, and then I decided to pursue it as a career and came out to LA. I don't know what your original question was. Is that anything close to an answer to your original question?
That's good enough for me. It's even better than what I would have. No, this is why this has to flow. That's a creative force, right? It goes where it's supposed to go. Mm-hmm. So please take it anywhere you want. But so then you came to LA. What did mom and dad say?
My father,
were you crazy?
Really, he ended up being supportive, as was my mom. Mm-hmm. But this is a man of the Depression. So the fact that I would give up a good paying radio job, I was a successful afternoon drive person at a radio station in Buffalo. Why would you do that? To go out there and not get paid and have no sense of your ability to have success out there? I said, just because I have to try it. I didn't have any kids at the time. I just wanted to try it. So once he saw I was sincere about it, then they supported me completely. And then when I finally got on the Tonight Show, I had arrived. And that proved to them that I had made it. And my father was not a big fan of Johnny Carson. He just didn't like him. But then I performed on the Bob Hope Christmas show. All bets are off, because Bob Hope was a huge hero to the World War II and post World War II generation. When I went on the Bob Hope show, I was Mr. Show Business.
It's interesting. You're bringing all this up. Clearly, entertainment and how we consume it and how we all collectively enjoy a moment has just changed, right? In fact, I was very recently at the Venice Film Festival over in Italy, and I was speaking about media and film and how it used to be that we would all show up together to watch the blockbuster movie, right? It would be, gosh, can you even get a ticket that weekend? Or the Bob Hope special, right? Everybody would collect around the television, no matter who it was in the neighborhood, they probably had it on. It's very different now, right? I mean, everything's splintered. It doesn't mean it's better or worse. It's just that, the commonality that we had really brought us together, I think, as a community, as a people, as a nation. And now we're just all over the place, don't you think?
1000%.
Yeah.
I do a lecture at Cal State Northridge, like I did up until recently, once a semester, for my friend who taught a class up there in broadcast management. And I always, and these are Gen Xers and Gen Yers or whoever is below that. And I would always start the class the same way. How many people here have watched a television newscast in the last month? Not one hand goes up.
No.
How many people get all of your information from social media? All hands go up. It's the TikTok generation. There is no family viewing, and streaming has changed everything. As a matter of fact, streaming is putting a dent in the business I retired from. It's killing primetime television in networks, because streaming, you control your own universe there. You start and stop the show when you want. You can watch as many as you want. There's no more appointment television where at 8 o'clock on Thursday you sit down and watch Seinfeld or the Bill Cosby show. It's the network controlled your timing. Now you control your own timing. So it's all different. And kids aren't watching TV. They're watching YouTube. YouTube has more viewers than children viewers. It's on television. It's, as you say, a very different universe.
Yeah, and I don't want to say it's better or worse, but there is something about collectively enjoying a moment at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did you see the movie? Oh, I couldn't get a ticket, but we're going next week. Or sitting around and watching Mary Tyler Moore. Gosh, am I aging myself? And just watching Friends. As opposed to whenever you want it on demand. I like doing
that's
stuff
my fear as being a live performer.
Yeah.
Is that we're going to somehow phase out of the communal experience of live entertainment.
I don't know about that.
You already see it now with films. In order for a film to even get released in a movie, they have to have a certain confidence that this is going to be like a blockbuster or semi-blockbuster. The Tom Cruise Top Gun Maverick, or Ghostbusters, some huge show where they can be sure it's going to have what they call an opening. Now people just wait and see it online, and it's pay-per-view. Although the thing is, you can spend $29 watching a movie online where it doesn't cost that much to see it in a theater. So I don't know, but it's a changing environment. And
go ahead. Oh, all right. Well, you're the guest. I should let you go, but forget it. I'll take it.
No.
I think it might go back. First of all, you can never, ever replicate a live experience. Even if you're coming into my living room, my den, wherever I watch it, it's not the same as going and seeing and feeling the vibration in a theater. I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll have less audiences, but it's Sebastian Maniscalco. You know who he is, right?
Absolutely.
And he just sold out. I think he sold out at one of the largest
4
arenas.
nights at Madison Square Garden. It's a record.
Exactly. So talk to me about that, right? I mean, a good experience live, I don't think you can ever replicate that. I also read and also Kindle, right? I know my husband, for example, loves to read on Kindle. I won't go near Kindle. I like to touch a book. I read a lot. And apparently I read an article, I think it was a Wall Street Journal, that Gen Zers and younger millennials, they don't want the Kindle. They want to touch the book too. So maybe we will go back a little bit. Maybe there's going to be a hybrid. What do you think?
I would hope so. I don't know if it will be enough to save the movie industry,
I know.
but live entertainment like theater and stand up and a singing performer. I hope you're right. I really do,
Yeah.
because what makes an evening on my show so special, for instance, is that people are relating to what you're saying, and they're relating to the person next to them because they're relating to what I'm saying. And so it connects them in this sort of subconscious way. And it's a beautiful experience for me and for the audience when it works. You're
Yeah.
right. I hope that never stops.
I don't think so. You know, when I was watching your show over at the El Portal Theater, I noticed what other people were laughing about. And it was interesting because I thought, oh, that must have been their experience. You know, I'm not a regular person who goes to watch things. I sort of watch everybody else around me, and then I absorb their energy in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was watching, I was laughing at something different than the lady next to me, but it does make a great experience for all that. I don't know if that's ever going to go away. I mean, look at Broadway.
I think it's a tribal thing that's been around as long as humanity's been on the planet. It's all sitting around the campfire having a common experience.
Absolutely. The campfire, the forum. I mean, wherever you are, not the forum, but
Mm-hmm.
the Coliseum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you are, no matter when it was, 2000 years ago or a
Yeah.
campfire,
Yeah.
a story is a story, and someone's life is, I don't know. It's actually a beautiful thing. But who were some of the comics? You said you went, talk to me about some of the comics that you went to go see who really inspired you. But you also opened for some incredible headliners. Can we talk about that?
Sure. I opened for Ray Charles
Wow.
at a place that no longer exists called the Universal Amphitheater. Then they turned it into the Back to the Future ride, and it was all downhill from there.
Oh.
And I opened for Debbie Reynolds a couple of times, who was an hysterical woman in her own right. And I opened for the band America. I opened for George Benson, the jazz artist. I opened for Stanley
Wow.
Clarke, the jazz bassist. Um, uh, I've opened for a bunch of people. I opened for Jay Leno twice at the Geffen Theater in out in your home, Brentwood or Westwood. And so I've opened for a few people, and it's wonderful. You just have to eat the fact that they're not there to see you. And so, for instance, with Ray Charles, it was still fun because it was an iconic moment. And I didn't even care if I got, I just wanted to get my picture taken with him. And you're performing while people are coming in the theater because sometimes they don't get there. So you have to just put that out of your mind. They're not there to see you, but it's an honor and a great experience anyway. They had great.
Oh, it really is. Do you get to, speak to the talent? Not, you're the talent, but so are they. Do you get to speak to the headliner before they go on, or is it sort of a situation
Not
where?
always. That's a very interesting question. Not always. Sometimes they're sequestered in their dressing room, and you come and just go and do on the stage, and then you leave. And if they're waiting in the wings when you leave, they'll say thank you very much. But I've never had an experience where I just hung out with it. Oh no, that's not true. That's not true. I opened for Tom Petty one time at the Malibu Performing Arts Center before it became, and now it's like a community center, and it was a fundraiser, and and they had no dressing room facilities for anybody. So I'm just kind of wandering around backstage. He goes, "Fritz Coleman, the weatherman, get in here." He said, "You're wandering around aimlessly. Sit in here and hang out with us." So I got to hang out with him and Ben Montench and all the guys in his band for a few minutes. He was very, very cool guy. But that was just an accident of not having any place to hang out, so they invited me in.
You just said Tom Petty said Fritz Coleman, the weatherman.
Oh yeah, well he's a Malibu resident. People that's one of the hardest things to get used to about being in the news in LA. People know you. It's so odd. It's a very hard thing to get used to. I was in a restaurant in Sherman Oaks called Le Serre. It was a French restaurant. And in Le Serre, they had one little dining area in the middle called the gazebo, where they had, ivy and around. And so all of us from Channel 4 went there after the 6 o'clock news to have dinner one night. There were like 5 of us sitting at this table, and I was at the table facing the back, facing the wall. And I'm looking at my co-table mates here, and I see all the blood drain from their face, and they suddenly look up at somebody that's standing in back of me. And then I hear, well, look, it's my Channel 4 family, my favorite people. And standing in back of me was Jimmy Stewart, recognizing everybody at the table. And I almost dropped my Caesar salad. But I mean, you just never know. In LA, you just never know who's watching. It's so funny.
Oh, what a classic. I saw him perform at the MacArthur Theater in Princeton. I went to Rutgers since, I'm from back east, but they had a lot of reciprocal programs. And I was always going down to Princeton. I studied English literature, so I'd always go down there and take a course or two, right? And there he was performing. I got to see him, and I thought, because, that was my mother's generation, right? And I was so proud to be able to see him. But here we are now. He recognizes Fritz Coleman. Come on,
it's just fun. You never get used to it. It's so odd. And you become very self-conscious in every newscast for a couple of weeks. Jimmy Stewart's sitting in his pajamas watching you do the weather.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Think about that. Everybody's in their pajamas watching you do the weather, right? They're preparing.
Very odd.
Yeah,
it's
but
very odd.
Everybody knows you, and they like you. That's the thing. It's not like you're a guy who's not liked, right? Wherever you go, it's like, oh, it's not Weatherman again, right? I mean, that must still happen to you a lot.
It's really odd. That vibe you're talking about is very odd because it's LA, so there are real stars. So, if you're the famous weatherman in Boise, Idaho, you're the biggest star in town, but this is LA. It's not like they're running into Tom Cruise. It's like they're running into a friendly neighbor, or, we're like, local news people are like one step below dinner theater in the food chain of show business. And so when they recognize you, it's this friendly engagement. It's not like, oh my God, it's, so-and-so and get an autograph. They're just very nice because, you're part of the fabric of their lives watching the news.
There's no doubt about it. You're sort of part of the family because you come in every day. Whereas a movie star, if you will, is on this big screen and they're larger than life and they don't really know them. They just know them as the movie star in Mission Impossible. But you're the guy who's in their house every day and it feels like they know you. I think that's almost even more cool.
I have many stories about that. I'll give you one. I was in Vaughn's in Toluca Lake.
Yeah.
And this old lady came up to me and she grabbed me by the elbow and she said, I've been watching you every day for 30 years. You're part of my life. I know my day is going to be okay when you're on there, but I want to make one suggestion. I said, please do. I feel like I owe you your suggestion. She said, never wear that tie you wore last Thursday. It's flattering. They take, particularly if there's a maternal thing there, they have a proprietary interest in you because they invite you into their house every day. So I'm going to tell you what clothes not to wear. So it's very funny.
What do you think of the whole world of social media? Because look, let's face it, every radio host, every TV host, every reporter has their name with TV after it, and they've got to be posting all the time so that everybody watches them and their news story on the air every night. It's a real pain in the what. What do you think about it?
It's changed everything. In stand-up comedy, for instance, you can't even get booked in a club unless you have a huge social media following. You can't headline in a club unless you've got like 500,000 million social media followers because you're doing their work for them. Because if you market to your fans, they don't have to spend money in the newspapers to advertise that you're going to be there. It's not fair, really. I'm too old. I'm in my 70s. I'm not engaged with social media that much. I have somebody that does it for me to promote gigs because I have to, but you can't even get a booking. When you get booked on the, I'll give you an example. A very funny comic by the name of Nate Bargatze is going to be the host of Saturday Night Live this week. His whole fame came from a huge social media presence. And the social media presence got him his Netflix special, and it built that way. So his whole career was built from social media.
You're right. You know what? But you're right. It is kind of lazy of the companies. And you mentioned, by the way, during what you were just telling me, you said advertising on the in the newspapers. What newspapers? Right? I mean, there's where? It's like I don't have mine even come over the fence anymore because I don't know. We just don't. We get our news and consume it online, which
on the
is kind
phone.
of a
Yeah,
which is a
absolutely.
drag, but I guess that's the way it is, right? It's changing. But once again, I'm reading how now the micro, I don't like this word influencers, but here we go. The micro influencers with smaller followings, now people or companies are more interested in because they realize they
Yes,
have a more engaged audience,
I'll tell you,
right?
that's so true. And
Yeah.
I have my accountant does work for a small group of newspapers called the Outlook, and they have like 5 or 6 of them in Southern
I know
California.
I know the outlook. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and that kind of journalism, what they call not narrowcasting, but it's like microcasting, as you're saying,
Yeah.
the small penetration in local communities is the only way papers are going to survive because first of all, they're advertising with the people in that local area, the car dealerships. They're talking about school issues. They're talking about high school sports. It's the only kind of newspapers that are surviving right now,
Yeah.
and it's a different world.
It's different, but like I said, I think we are going to start to go back to that smaller community stuff. We've lost it terribly, and I
Yeah.
think everybody feels a little bit adrift. You know, that's why going to a show like yours, right? We feel like we have something in common. I really do believe that show is for everyone because it is, and I felt very communal there. Let
Good.
me talk to you a little bit about the El Portal Theater.
Please.
I mean, that's a real history, right there. I
Yeah.
mean, talk to us about the
The
theater.
El
Just
Portal
what?
Theater, it's the large house in there
Mm,
is 365 seats. It's called that theater is called the Debbie Reynolds Stage at the El Portal Theater. It's called the Debbie Reynolds Stage because that theater started in the 20s as a vaudeville house. Bob Hope, Red Buttons, old vaudevillians performed on there live in the era of vaudeville. Then that thing morphed into a movie palace. It was a very elegant movie theater that serviced Burbank and North Hollywood. And when she was 7 or 8 years old, Debbie Reynolds, who was born and raised in Burbank, rode her bike to the El Portal Theater to watch movies when she was younger and went there all the
wow.
time and just had great allegiance to the theater. And when she would prepare her Vegas act or her road act, she would always come and test it out at the El Portal Theater. So, in deference to her, they named it the Debbie Reynolds Stage. And we had her son come in. She had passed, and so had her daughter had passed, Princess Leia, and had her son come in and sort of christen the place. Now I'm in the Marilyn Monroe Forum at the El Portal, which is the small, what they call Equity Waiver Theater. It's 100 seats or slightly above, where I do my show once a month. And they name it the Marilyn Monroe Theater because across their parking lot is North Hollywood Elementary School, where Marilyn Monroe was a student for a while. So the Marilyn Monroe Forum at the El Portal Theater is where I work, and there's a lot of wonderful history in that place.
Yeah, and it's a nice intimate theater. Is that the size you like? Is that do
I
you
love
prefer?
it. I love to
Yeah.
be able to walk right up and look in the eyes of the participants and make it like a conversation if I can.
Mm.
It's a great space.
So you're retired from giving us the weather. I know you can't officially give me a weather forecast because you're not doing that any longer. Not that I was going to ask you, but I know you don't do that.
I'm not licensed.
Um,
I relinquished my license to it.
yeah. So is this? Do you want to travel and take this on the road? Like, what do you want
I
to do with
would.
unassisted living? Because it's so fabulous, Fritz. Go ahead.
I would. I would go on the road if I, were booked outside the state. Because of my television presence, I'm huge between Santa Barbara and the Mexican border. I can sell tickets anywhere in there, but to get booked outside, I have to build over time. But I'm getting a lot of great work. I get a lot of work in Orange County, and
Oh yeah.
I'm having a wonderful time. I don't put the pressure on myself that if I don't do this, I don't get groceries. I don't do it for the money. I do it because of the joy of performing and the fact that I don't have to go back and do the 11 o'clock news at night is a gift. So,
Does it give you more time to see your kids and grandkids?
absolutely. Yes.
You know, you
Yes.
talked about babysitting during the pandemic.
Right.
I don't want to give too much away of your show, but I don't think that gives much
Yeah.
away,
We,
really.
we had to uh, when the schools were closed,
Yeah.
we looked after our two grandchildren. The older one is a granddaughter. She's 11 now and 9. During the pandemic, they were 8 and 6 or whatever it turns out to be. And I'm no longer married to grandma, but we're great friends, and we sort of co-grandparent and co-parent our family. And so we had them every single day. And I was very happy because when my kids needed me to look out for their children, for instance, during the pandemic, I finally was allowed to babysit for them again, because there was a period of time there where my children did not want me babysitting for my children, for their children, because I was irresponsible as a babysitter. I would fall into a deep sleep on the couch, and these kids would run willy-nilly all over the house. They would stay up past their bedtime. They would eat a whole container of red vines. The dog would be out running around the neighborhood, and I made my children afraid to let me babysit. So during the pandemic, I worked my way back because they needed us to babysit. And, before the pandemic, I was third on the call list for babysitting. Number 1 was another responsible family member. Number 2 was a homeless person. And number 3 was a grandpa. And so I was happy to be able to watch out for my kids during the pandemic. It was fun. It was full bonding.
Yeah. Now you've got all that time. Is there anybody you'd like to perform with? Would you like to do comedy with somebody?
Well, my regular opener is Wendy Liebman, who's hysterical. She has
Great.
her own Showtime special. She's opened for many famous people herself. She opens for Bill Maher all the time, and she's my regular. However, she's taking our next show at the El Portal Theater, incidentally, is October 10th, and it's on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because for my particular demographic, they like to be home by dark. So at 3 o'clock. And so the next times, Wendy is taking off to watch Joni Mitchell at the Hollywood Bowl. So I'm going to have a guest that week, and it's going to be Brian Kiley, who was a writer for Conan O'Brien for 26 years on all of his television shows, and he wrote on the last year of the Ellen DeGeneres show. And so he's hysterical, a wonderful guy, a nice guy, and a funny guy. So he's going to open the show for me on October 10th, and I'll do my regular show.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. People, please go see the show, Unassisted Living. We absolutely love it. We'll come again because, you always get something different out of the second time, right? It really is lovely.
Okay.
So I enjoyed it so much. Anything else you'd like to tell our audience before I
we're
let you go?
October 10th, and the one after that is November 20th. And that'll be after the election and after Halloween. So who knows what sort of an attitude I'll have at that point. So just come to the show. If you'd like tickets, go to elportaltheater.com. They have it posted right there. You can get a ticket. There are still several openings for the 20th of October and many for November 10th. Love to have you.
Fritz Coleman, I really enjoyed our conversation. I thank you so much.
You're very good at this. You made it so easy.
Well, I guess this is what I've done my whole life, right? It's like, it's really all I know to do. I'm not quite sure what else I would do if I didn't ask people questions. I drove my mother crazy at the age of 5 because all I did was say why. And now we know why, right? Because it's really all I enjoy doing. So thank you for that compliment. I'll take it quite to my heart.
No, please do keep up the good work.
Yeah, and maybe one of these days we really will have that time together with your dear friend Mark Thompson. I just love him. In fact, we went traveling with them. We were traveling with them for a week in Morocco. I mean, that's how close.
He travels. He and his girlfriend travel all over the world.
They're lovely.
He's a good man.
Good man.
He recently lost his father, and it was very, very hard for him. He had been traveling back to Washington frequently to see his dad in the last days of his life, and he's just a good human being and one of the smartest people I know. I used to say that all the time. This guy read like 5 or 6 newspapers every morning. He was so on top of current events, it was ridiculous.
And he's got that voice.
He's got the pipes. He's got the. I told Mark, when I pass away, I would like him to make the announcement.
Yeah, I mean, how do you not? I mean, it's that delivery. I said to him once, did you talk like this when you were like 7 or 8 at school? Like you'd raise your hand and you sort of delivered it like that. Yeah. So I love him, and also with Tim. Maybe we can all get together sometime. I would enjoy that
Yes, we
so
should.
much.
You know what? At the very least, we should get together for a dinner. That would be funny. And you could tape it and use it as a podcast because it'd be hysterical. Sure.
Oh, could you imagine? All right. Well, we're going to work on that. I really mean
Okay.
that. So anyway, Fritz Coleman, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And everybody, you can find my conversation with Fritz Coleman on Deborah Kobylt Live, YouTube, Facebook. We will then post some promos on our Instagram. And then as an audio podcast, we're on iHeartRadio. We're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon. I don't know. Wherever you get your podcast, just look us up and you'll find us as an audio version as well. You won't be able to get rid of us. So anyway, thank you very much for joining us. And we